Today we're here at the Healing and Empowerment Match. My name's Denise Andrews from the Milroy peoples, and I wish to acknowledge the Irrigal people here on the lands we meet upon today.
So my name's Mark Winters, and I'm the kind of the Public Health Medical Officer, Senior Medical Officer at Apunapima, which is a local Aboriginal community-controlled health organisation that delivers services up there in Cape York. So so I worked in laboratories up here for 10 years in pathology, looking at all sorts of bad things that come out of people, from worms right through to blood tests and stuff like that. But that was what kicked me into medicine, actually, was seeing how much bad stuff was happening up here. The other thing that kicked me into medicine was that I used to get these migraines, going to the local hospital here, and so I was basically a skinny Aboriginal person who was vomiting, so I'd get treated as an alcoholic every time I went in. And seriously treated badly by the medical profession more than anybody else. So that's kind of what pushed me into, don't get me wrong, they're not that bad now, but this was 20 years ago. So it was a shocker, I'd get just rolled out the back and I'd say, I don't drink, and they'd go, well, we'll just put you out the back until you're prepared to tell us the truth, You go, damn, that drove me to drink. We did a screen a couple of years ago in one of the local Indigenous schools, and so these are 12 to 19-year-old students there, and we thought we'd just get sexual health issues and relationship stuff and a few bits and other pieces like that. What we found was over 60% of those kids had adverse childhood experiences or had been subjected to fairly severe trauma, everything from seeing their mum stabbed in front of them to the usual kind of domestic violence and alcohol and stuff like that. Not a single one of those kids had been offered any intervention or any counselling, and they were all happy to get it. And as a matter of fact, they're probably too blasé about it, which makes you worry even more, But one of the things that we found in that was that you really do need to have a decolonising approach and response, and that means actively looking for the local people in the local community and the leaders there to be strongly involved right from the start in the responses. There's very different background and context, or I should say contemporaneous issues around the time of suicides that are different for Indigenous and non-Indigenous. And as you know, mostly in mainstream it's about loss of job, loss of income, relationship breakdown, trouble at school and stuff like that. For our mob, although those things were present as well, the bigger ones were trouble with the police, recent bereavement, recent suicide and social conflicts. We also found from that study that depression was 4 times less likely to be diagnosed in our mob before a suicide, whether that's because we're not looking for it or whether for other reasons, or access to primary healthcare, or whether we're just pretty crap at primary healthcare and helping people. Don't know yet, but a lot less prevalent. The professors down in JCU in Townsville has been doing stress hormone response in Indigenous people versus non-Indigenous people, and our stress hormone response is different. It's pretty interesting stuff and could really be helpful in the future. Thanks very much for listening.
Thank you.
Well, I did all the centre part, and my little black feet there were running around. This is the heartland of Jabbergaw. And if you walk up the street, you'll see very few Aboriginal people employed in the local businesses, which isn't good. So the only place that is the biggest employer is Nunbai, and Nunbai that creates jobs for Aboriginal people.
If you're talking about the empowerment of one, or you're talking about the empowerment of a group or the community, first of all, you've got to work with them. You empower the individual.
But you have a strong individual, makes up a strong family, makes up a strong community. It's the way that things are done back within each community. Whatever is done has to be done in a culturally appropriate way.
Kia ora koutou katoa, ngā mihi nui kia koutou. So I'm Donna Blair. I'm of Kaitahu and Kate Māmoe from the west coast of the South Island. So I thought I would start by talking about and thinking about what is our essence, what is our life force, what sustains us, our mauri. So for us as Māori, we talk about a mauri, a life force within. So it started me thinking about the people that we work with, the people who are damaged in our families and in our community, and how do we look to sustain their life force for them when sometimes they're not able to do it for themselves, and sometimes we're not able to do it for ourselves too. So in terms of wairua for us, wairua is around spirituality. So it's more than religion. It is a spirituality. It is about a life force, not just for ourselves, but for every living thing. And so what I thought I would just share with you is a couple of images that to me represent wairua. Well, for us watching our whānau who often have addiction and mental health issues, when they're starting to express themselves through their arts, through their music, they transform. They bring the most beautiful things from somewhere, from within, into being. It's absolutely amazing. And then I was thinking about tinana. So how do we heal our tinana? So when we're working with people, yes, we use medications when we need to. We use diet if we need to, and we use exercise. We try to ensure that people have good sleep hygiene, that they're getting a good sleep. So these are all part of the healing process for us. So when I was thinking about the healing and healers, I was thinking about it and from a different perspective, because sometimes I think we can get caught in talking therapies, very Western models, and we get limited in thinking about that. So what I wanted to do was think about what does that look like for us as Indigenous people, because we don't draw just from one string, so to speak. We bring in a whole range of activities when we think about healing ourselves and our people. We all lead a busy life, but every now and again we need something for ourselves that will help to sustain ourselves. And being part of this group, this rōpū, is part of that healing for me, because I get to have some amazing, wise conversations that really nurture my soul and my being. So I want to mihi to you all. Ngā mihi nui ki a koutou. Thank you very much. Te hei mauri ora. Kia ora.
When I used to be very involved in working in mental health, one of the things I found I got really very drained. And one of the things I used to do is I used to go back to country. This sounds a bit weird, but I'd actually sit and rub my feet in it. I sit on my bum actually, and I'd just be rolling my feet around in the dirt, and then I'd get the dirt and I'd throw it over me. Just, this is my dirt, I know. And that connection to my own land, and on that land is where my people walked. To me, that was reconnecting, gaining strength from all of that, not so much the dirt, but what it represented, the footprints, the living, everything that was in that area.
Uju. Good morning, everyone. Ojosh Kumbanesi Dishnakaz, Nikik Dodem, Manitou Abantaguna Dunji. Greetings. I introduced myself in Anishinaabemowin, which is my Indigenous language, and I first shared my traditional name, Ojosh Kumbanesi, and when we translate that name to English, it translates to Blue Thunderbird. So I'm here this morning to talk about the Frere Rata Declaration. So this is an international group that has come together to really talk about the role of Indigenous leadership and be able to work collaboratively around many different issues that impact all of us in our different areas of the world. So in terms of some of the Indigenous mental health challenges, we know that we have a lot of similarities in terms of our roots through colonizations, the responses, dealing with government policies, the impacts on our kind of social well-being, our wellness, our mental wellness. And particularly when we begin to think about the impacts on suicide and the suicide rates. I know that in Canada we've done research, then we've looked at some of the suicide rates in communities, and where we found that communities have very strong cultural basis, good understanding of language, some control over their lives, self-determining, we find that there are much less suicide rates. And I think that that makes a lot of sense, right? And then when we look at areas where there are increased levels of suicide rates, we don't actually see those protective factors. I think one of the most important elements to this is really looking at the health and the leadership in order to move things forward. Just because we're Indigenous people, it doesn't necessarily mean that we're culturally competent to work with all Indigenous people. And I think that because of our route through colonization, many of us have grown up without culture, without teachings, and really came to developing an Indigenous worldview in a different way, sometimes through teens, and sometimes for some people not until until they were an adult, when they really became connected and had available relationships with medicine people and elders that really kind of helped them along that journey. But I think that there's a balance there, and I do think that when we think about being really skilled and being able to really help our people, there is that balance between culture and clinical competency. And so sometimes we find that existing within individuals, and sometimes we actually need to convene teams, which brings together those different competencies. And I think that that's a really important element in the Whare-a-Rata Declaration, is that we're able to really advance that in a way that's meaningful, and be able to implement kind of programs and policies that support those pieces.
It's the Queensland Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Social and Emotional Wellbeing Action Plan. It's a Queensland government document. It is a whole of government document. But I do want to highlight some of the important things about this document. And that is that there's 62 actions, and they're across agency actions of the Queensland government. So government departments have committed to improve social and emotional wellbeing for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Queenslanders. That's their aim. We know, as Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, and have known for a long time, our social and emotional wellbeing, our healing, our health, our practice. What does it mean? What does social and emotional wellbeing mean to us? Such a simple but complex question hadn't been asked. Or if it had been asked, it hadn't actually been documented anywhere. The strength of this document, it formulated a definition for this document. It breaks up into three groupings, or three priority areas, and again, this was through the voices of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. And the front cover of the document has those descriptions about what is important: country, land, spirit, connection, resilience. All of those key constructs have been embedded into this document. And I'm very happy to say it also builds on and incorporates, and it's one of the first documents to incorporate the Gayadui, which picks up on the 9 principles that were developed in '79. So it continues a journey and a conversation, and is trying not to simply step on the past, but to bring it along the journey. And really the areas come down to some key things, again from the wording of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, about respect, about acknowledgement, about leadership, and the importance of leadership and decision making at the local levels. But it's also about supporting and improving the system that provides services to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people throughout Queensland. The Queensland Mental Health Commission will monitor the plan. It will produce a public report against the action plan, and we acknowledge that it's actually the beginning of this type of conversation in this way.
When I graduated as a psychologist, I actually didn't see a role for myself. We weren't talking the conversations we do now. Aboriginal advancement was seen as purely economical. So things have changed, but at the same time we weren't having the suicide rates that we have now. So I think society's changed, but our society has changed as well. Any advancement has to be in the community, number one. Without community, it's nothing. But we need other people, and I guess this is where Farawati and Gaidju, we need leadership at other levels too, to make sure that government's listening and policies changing. You know, in the universities and academia, we're also changing the research agenda that looks at Indigenous mental health, social emotional wellbeing issues, doing it in that right kind of research methodology as well. I'll talk a little bit about the Gaidju. You know, some of the issues that we want to do is building access to cultural healers and cultural healing, supporting the development of an Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander values-based social emotional wellbeing mental health outcome measures. We are actually involved with that. We're talking to the Australian Bureau of Statistics, wearing, you know, a couple of hats there, but looking at how they're measuring social emotional wellbeing. We're about work as well, that Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander people need to be trained, employed, empowered and valued to work across all parts of the mental health system.
So we talked a bit about some of the issues that we have, and we also heard some international issues as well, which were a lot similar to what we have here in Australia.
Part of the work that we were talking about is just really having those of us in leadership who are non-Indigenous really having the cultural humility to understand and know that there are other ways, there's knowledge that's already existing that we recognize, and that those organizations, those non-Indigenous organizations, need to have that humility to understand and know that their answers are already existing within community, that there are programs that are working, that we need to have that humility when we go in as a non-Indigenous organization to really support and amplify the work of others.
Parents don't understand what their children are being exposed to because they're not educated about the technology and what children are accessing these days. So recommendations in regards to let's spread our social emotional wellbeing experience into other sectors that are affecting our future leaders.
Given that we were the host country, obviously we had more Indigenous Australians participating and sharing up what we were doing. It was interesting to hear some of the New Zealand and Canadian initiatives, but the fact that they actually went into communities too. So I think that's what they'll take away.